Hello, everybody. I'm Ron Rogers with OCALI. And of course, as you all know, this is 10 minutes with Barb and Ron. And so, something about me. If you watch episodes 1 through 5, you should have an idea who we are. But every time we try to throw something new in. So, I have 2 kids. It's all you, Barb.
Ron, that's so funny because I was going to talk about my kids too, but you know, can you at least tell us the age of your kids or something?
Oh, well, yeah, I guess I could. The first one that we had was a boy, and everybody asked kind of like, well, you know, do you want a boy or a girl? And I just said I wanted a baby. So the first one's a boy, he's 16, and the second one's a girl, and she's 12.
All right. Very cool.
How about you,
Can't wait
Barb?
to meet him in person. So Barb Gentili Green here. I have 3 children, Ron. I had a boy, then another boy, and then a little girl. But the thing that is really fun about it is they were all born about the first 2 are a year and a half apart, and the second two were about a year apart, 13 months. So it was a lot of diapering and a lot of fun. And now they are so close as adults. It's super fun to watch them. So yeah. All that hard work paid off. So
well, I'm hoping the investment pays off too, but I won't know for a while still. They're still in the mode of not talking to each other. So
that happens. You know, this is kind of funny that we talked about our kids because, you know, today's topic, I'm curious to hear about it, Ron, because I was thinking, wonder if that would apply to how we introduced ourselves, but go for it. What are we talking about today?
We're talking about something great. We're going to talk about something that everybody needs to do. And you know what? Well, we're going to talk about something that has been used in aviation. It's been used in the health field. And I think at some points it's been used in education. But I think as educators, we sometimes forget how important it is to have it. And that's checklists.
Checklists.
Okay,
Yeah.
Barb, I can see what you're thinking. You're thinking, oh man, a superintendent gets a checklist. They do it once and it's done forever. You know, and that's not the kind of checklist I'm talking about. I'm talking about a checklist that you go back to a lot. It just saves brain power, but it helps you always be right on target.
Very cool. Well, you gave us a checklist for 10 minutes with Barb and Ron. And then after the first time you put that out there, and then you asked me, Barb, did you use the checklist? And I'm like, oh man, I forgot. So how do people use checklists, and how do you help people so they use them? Remember to use them.
You know, for you and I, Barb, the checklist was great because we kept having all these issues because we didn't know for sure how to use the recording software. We didn't know for sure how to make the speakers all work or the microphones work or this, that, and the other. So, you know what? We came up with a great just a simple, and it's backwards, so I don't even need to show it, but anyway, it's just ours, and it has 16 different steps to it. And Barb, you know what? When we go by the checklist, we don't have any troubles at all. It's like wonderful. And the number 16 says good luck, you know, on the checklist. So, you know, checklists, you know, it's one of those things that help aid us. It compensates for me, the low thought processes. You know, as I get older, the thought processes are slower. They're not as active. So it really helps with my human memory because it frees things up. I know if I go through the checklist, I'll have everything right. It helps to ensure that consistency and completeness in carrying out the task. I'll tell you what, this is how I came up with the idea. It wasn't so much because you and I came up with this checklist. It was really because my son, it turned 16, and since 15 and a half, he's been practicing driving. And he kept forgetting either to take off the emergency brake, or he'd forget to push it on the clutch because everything he's driven's been manual, or he's just forgotten something. And I kept telling him, run through a checklist in your head, run through a checklist in your head. And he's like, Dad, what would the checklist look like? So we wrote out a checklist, and now he does everything fine because he goes down through the checklist. If he doesn't do the checklist, things aren't too fine, you know, but it helps. Can you think of something that you liked, you know, for a checklist?
Well, right away, I thought about when you mentioned your son, I thought about my daughter because in her younger years, and she probably wouldn't mind me saying this even today, and you talk about like remembering things and trying to just free up some brain space. And she just had so many things going on in her life. She was a very busy young child. She was thought about a lot of things. And so it started off where I made her a checklist in the morning for what to do to get ready for school. And it was so helpful for her to get through everything she needed to do to get out the door to catch that bus. They rode a bus. But what was really cool is how then she started making her own checklist, because then it became hers. And so when I think about how we can use it with kids, I think that's an important step. We help them, we provide them, but then we teach them how to make their own so that they can put in it whatever they feel they need that makes sense to them. So that came to my mind as soon as you mentioned your son.
That's so cool. It's just so cool. Some people would ask then, well, how do I create a good checklist? Well, I'm going to pull from one of the things that you always like to say, Barb. Do a brain dump. Isn't that you that always says do a brain dump?
I do use that a lot. Yeah.
Do a brain dump. Organize the things that you think you have to do. Organize them, either, draw some pictures or organize them somehow, either written or whatever, and then kind of put them in an order that you think would work. Then go down through the order and see if it works, and then continue adding items. I know on our list, we started out with like 10 and we're up to 16 because there was things we needed to add. One of my friends, he flies an airplane. And you know what? He would never leave the ground without doing the checklist.
Yeah. Yeah.
So why do we do some things without a checklist? It's kind of crazy because it just invites complications if we don't. I've been through surgeries before, and the doctor always has a checklist. When they're done with the surgery, they have a checklist. Yeah. That way Ron doesn't find something inside himself that was left, like a scalpel or scissors or a bunch of gauze, checklists are good.
I visualized something when you were talking about that brain dump, and I thought of two different tools that people could use for checklists. So I just like a piece of paper, right? Because I write it down and then I can cross it off. But I also thought about things like those little sticky notes, because you could then rearrange the order of things if on a given day you were engaging in an activity and there was some change to it. You could move your sticky notes around to what it makes sense for that day. And then on an executive function presentation that I saw actually that was done at OCALI a few years ago, they took those paint chips, the ones that you get at the hardware store when you're painting and you can pick out, and it's all these gradations of color.
Yes.
And they wrote steps on each of those paint colors. And I thought that was another visual way to present a checklist that might be appealing for some folks that color works for. So.
Yeah, I like that. I like that idea. That would be pretty fun, wouldn't it? That would be pretty cool.
So, Ron, when you think about a checklist, do you think about it then becoming a part of the person's just memory? It's gone from short-term to long-term memory and they no longer need it? Do you see a transition to it becoming embedded in their brain so they don't need a physical kind of checklist? Or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, if we think about universal design for learning, we think about that temporary scaffold. When you're painting a building, you don't need the scaffold there for years. You just need it there until you're done painting. And I really wrestled. This is episode 7. And I thought, should I look at the checklist today or not? Because you know what? Even with my weak memory, it's starting to be embedded pretty good. And I challenged myself to set this up without the checklist, but then I did double check with the checklist to make sure I did everything. So I would say it's probably just a temporary thing. So my son, for example, will probably need it written down for a little while, and then after a while he'll do it naturally, like driving the car and things.
Yeah. I like that you brought that up about the scaffolding, because when I think about classrooms that are so universally designed, I think about things that are there if kids need them, and if kids don't need them, that's fine. And so I almost think of this notebook of checklists that, because on any given day, if my cognitive load is just too burdensome,
Yes.
I might need that checklist because something else has happened that is kind of, affecting me that day. And so it's not gone forever, right? It's still a scaffold that I can go back to. So, I think the idea of keeping them available in some way for when you need them, because you never know.
You're right. You never know. And well, wow, the time goes so quick when we do these, Barb. I don't even know where all the time goes. When you think about trauma informed, this is going to be my conclusion, okay? When you think about the trauma that some students come with in our classrooms, I think about how sometimes they come into class really edgy, and maybe that's a day that they might need a checklist, because in that way they can kind of still maybe stay, I don't know, they don't have to put so much thought into the process, and they can free up a little brain space to do what, it's hard. It's just hard. So checklists are there to help. That's kind of where I'm at.
That's an excellent strategy for any child, but especially for kids who might have some of that trauma going on in their lives. So I'm going to kind of go a different way on my concluding thought, because you mentioned UDL and you mentioned the checklist is a temporary scaffold. And it made me think about how some people think of the UDL framework as a checklist. And I just wanted to caution that it's really not a checklist. So the framework, that nice visual with the engagement and representation, action, expression, it is not a checklist. It is a guide for our thinking, but it is not a checklist. So we have an example and we have a non-example now. So that's my concluding thought. Barb is out.
I love it, Barb. Ron's out. Always remember to subscribe, though. Bye.
Bye.
YouTube, please subscribe. Like, comment, and share.